You're listening to the Governor's Podcast, which is hosted by school governors for school governors and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governor's Podcast, we have open, honest and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table and leaning in.
Hello, I'm Sharon Warmington and I support schools and academies as a governor, governance practitioner and a clerk. I'm also the CEO of the National Black Governors Network, supporting the education sector in diversifying their governing boards.
And it's Olivia D. Hind here, an under 30, unapologetically black female who is changing the face and space of school governance.
And you're listening to the Governor's Podcast. Okay, well, let's get into today's topic.
So as a clerk, what immediately comes to mind for you with regards to the chair role?
Well, as clerk, I have to be chair sometimes.
Oh yes, to start to get the
At
ball
the
rolling.
beginning of usually the academic year is when people usually elect their chairs. Some chairs will sit for 2 years. It could be written into terms of reference, and I know that because I've just been doing terms of references. For some, for stability purposes, they may say the chair will sit in that position for 2 years.
Okay, yeah. I think I've experienced that actually.
Yeah. Others, it's an annual thing. But what is the norm is
The same person. Continues.
And I have a big, I'll use the word problem, but I don't mean it in a negative way, if you make sense, although it can be negative. But the problem I have with that is that it makes it difficult for anybody to come in and visualize themselves because
in that position.
Yes. And I've just been having a conversation, a meeting with an organisation, I won't say who it is, who are wanting to sort of put in place for good governance a maximum term.
Okay.
Because in the private sector, the UK Corporate Governance Code says that 9 years. So it's three terms of 3 years. But in the education sector, there is no maximum. So you do have governors who have been serving in the same setting, and we've spoken about this previously, for literally decades. Now, it's not to say that a chair can't still be a chair.
Yeah, because some are really great chairs and so they do well.
But you have to have some form of succession planning.
Yes.
Because, if something happens and that chair decides to leave, then you're then stuck. Because then somebody is almost usually put upon under duress.
Yeah, they feel like they've just gone in the deep end.
Right. And that's never fair. It really isn't fair. So you want to build it into some form of succession planning and shadowing so that, I fundamentally believe, this is me speaking personally now.
Yeah.
If I accept a position as vice chair, then I am expecting to be chair at some point. And I think that is a good way to do it because you can work it so that out of, if you've got 3 meetings a year, then the vice chair chairs one of them.
Oh. Yeah, so that's the way looking at the chairship slightly differently. Not as a shared position because it's still one person, but kind of recognizing that at some point the chair will change and you can already know who that's likely to be.
Absolutely.
Because then it feels like for any governors, or new people coming in to become a governor of a particular school or academy, it means that they don't feel like they're jumping straight to chair. But and I guess that's what succession planning is all about, and that's why individuals having a plan for what kind of governorship journey do you want to experience, and then the school or the governing body creating that kind of culture of reasonable change.
Yes, absolutely.
So with regards to the chair role, if we focus on that, because I feel like this episode may be like a part 1, part 2 situation, because the chair and the vice chair, there's a lot of synergy in how we would like to look at it at a strategic level. And so I don't think you can speak about one without speaking about the other.
Absolutely.
But focusing on the chair position, would you say it's daunting for anyone in particular, or you need a certain type of characteristic in order to put yourself forward as chair, or even to hold a chair position? Is there something about the chair that sets them apart from any other governor around the table besides the title of chair?
Chairing can be quite straightforward to some people.
Comes naturally.
Or it could be very anxious. Other people can be very anxious and nervous about chairing. It depends on your experience in whatever setting.
Personality.
And that's not even about having a corporate background or working at senior management level, because you're a chair
of a committee
and you don't, you haven't followed a natural route in the corporate sector or anything like that. Your first experience of chairing has been in a school setting as a governor. So, but your personality, I suppose, your characteristics, your traits,
my naivety,
your ignorance, all played a part in doing that. I chaired my first committee meeting, not a school committee, but as part of a board that I'm on. I chaired my first meeting just a few days ago.
Wow.
And that's really strange considering I've been in governance for as long as I have.
Yes.
Yeah, I've sort of had informal kind of
leading thing.
I've led meetings, but in having the title,
chair.
I've been a vice chair of an IEB. I've been a link governor in many different settings. I've been a committee member, but to actually chair, this was my first time. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I wasn't nervous about it, because I think
you do have an element of that.
The chair has to be prepared.
Oh gosh, I know
they have to read the papers.
100%.
They have to almost have questions pre-prepared,
or even commentary, feedback on the items, because just in case no one else speaks,
exactly.
The chair has to.
Exactly. You can't float off in the middle of a meeting.
No,
or
you've got to be 100% present.
You have to be present. And so I think for some people that alone.
Exactly. I mean, if you hear out how we've just kind of described it, it's almost like a drum roll, like announcing this next big personality coming to the stage and you do the whole big introduction and then it's the chair. But I'd say it's like, I agree with what you're saying. I also think it's a confidence thing.
Yeah.
But I also believe anyone can be chair.
Absolutely.
I honestly believe that. I don't, just kind of almost answering my own question, I don't think there's necessarily a specific characteristic you need. I think there's a perception of what type of person you should be in order to put yourself forward as chair or to become a chair. Like, for example, those who have ran schools and they've been a head teacher or businesses. So it's those, as you were saying, the examples, or almost like the assumed profile of a person is someone who has led teams or run organizations in other settings or in previous chapters of their life or experiences or even current. But I also think there's an element of assumption and getting comfortable really quickly, whereas don't be afraid to be new to the space and step into that position.
With your own personality.
With your own personality, trusting that you have the knowledge and skills to at least get the ball rolling. Yes. You will learn stuff. You will make mistakes. I still make mistakes. I recently chaired the committee that I'm chair of. I was re-elected this past week. I think it was last week. And we were doing policies, and because there were like 8 or 10 policies on the agenda, because it was teaching and learning, we did the first 2, which one of the members of the senior leadership team was responsible for. And we got to those 2 and no other questions, no comments. We did the discussion. And then I just went to the next item on the agenda, which is another policy, which is someone else. And the head just said, Chair, we just need to approve those. And I was like, oh yeah, sorry, totally forgot. I forgot that sometimes some people approve them one by one.
Others do it en bloc.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you can just get caught up in the meeting of things. And you can easily, you're human error. You can easily forget something, but I don't think that's major.
I don't even think it's error or classed as
That's probably what I would class as because, like a slip up. Libby should know.
You're not going to know everything going in. That's a given. And even the most comprehensive role description is not going to include everything.
Yes.
So just like a job, you learn as you go along.
100%.
You get more comfortable. You develop more skills and knowledge of the subject matter of the kind of questions to ask and things like that.
Exactly.
Some people can come straight into a governor role and be elected as chair.
Oh, that happened to me.
Yeah.
My first ever governorship, I went straight in as the chair and never even got to meet the previous chair.
Right, exactly.
That was scary.
And that's why, again, succession planning is really important.
Yeah.
There's another aspect of it is I, as clerk, I experienced the change of a chair and I didn't like it.
You mean you went from a chair you liked to one you didn't?
It's not even that I didn't like the
click?
Incoming chair. Yeah.
You just didn't click.
We had, the previous chair and I had such a strong, balanced professional relationship.
Yes.
We sort of filled each other's gaps. The communication was really good and all of that. And it's almost like that was so good. This new chair came in and it was different, and that's fine.
Well, it's a different person.
Absolutely, and I accepted that.
Yeah.
But what I didn't like, was this particular chair had a different view of my role as clerk.
Right.
And it was let's just say it was seen as less than.
Oh, they almost like a looking down.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, you don't want to play that game with me.
Not me. not Miss Sharon Warmington. Oh, you don't know who you messing with.
So the fact that they didn't communicate with me leading up to the meeting in terms of getting the agenda sorted and all that, and then to try and pull me up in the meeting.
Oh. Yeah.
That was like...
Especially when you know you're a professional and you're there to serve.
Absolutely.
Serve the governing body, serve the leader of the governing body, being the chair, and you know your value.
If I'm wrong, I'm the first person to put my hand up.
You will hold your hand up.
If I've missed a paper or, in the days when we were
or the minutes haven't gone out on your timetable, everything. You will
I am the first person, absolutely. I will hold my hand up. And even when it's not my error,
you will
just for ease. Yeah. I'll take the responsibility because sometimes some things are just not worth arguing about.
Yeah, or delaying a meeting to be discussed in the meeting.
Absolutely. I will just say apologies, Chair, apologies, governors.
I'll action that.
I'll sort that out. If the paper's been printed and it's chopped off the bottom or something like that.
Even though it's not your job to reformat anything.
Absolutely, because it happens.
It does.
But what I won't do is be spoken down to.
So then it's looking at the personalities of chairs as well. Some chairs are very
For some, it goes to their head.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Very egotistical.
Yes, it's a title. It's a status. It's I'm superior. I'm the chair of this.
Yeah.
And everyone else works for me.
Yeah. When that's not governance.
No. Because you work as one entity. It's one body.
Absolutely. The chair leads the board.
Yes.
But
just to give you some order in those meetings and almost like a professional confidant for the head teacher. There's some because there's chair actions.
You need a leader.
You need that.
But that doesn't mean you don't have any more voting rights. It doesn't mean you're better than any of that.
None of that.
And so I have problems with chairs who are like that. Fortunately, I don't come across them very often.
No, I haven't experienced.
And if I'm in that position, I don't have a problem moving on. I don't get into a battle, and I certainly don't put up with it.
It comes down to, when you talk about leadership qualities and thinking about what kind of leader you are, if a chair leads the board or the governing body, then it's looking at the qualities that they have, the characteristics they have had. I don't want to say luckily, but I've been fortunate to only ever experience great chairs for the schools that I've been a part of and currently am. So you feel involved, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel valued. I think it also depends on how you are as a person as well. I'm someone who I think with more time that I'm invested or a part of the schools that I sit on the governing body for, I feel more confident to voice a different opinion, to ask a question, to probably have a side chat with the chair when it's not necessarily necessary to have it in a wider meeting setting, to send an email and say, I don't know how to go about this. What would be your advice? Because I've done that in the past year.
Yeah, chairs speaking to other committee chairs as well.
And I think what does help in one of because in the last 12 months I've been a part of 2 secondary schools. I'm only attached to one now, and what really does help is the fact that by putting myself forward for a committee chair position, it gives me more of an incentive or a bit more motivation to communicate to the chair of the LGB, because I almost can understand their position a bit more, because at some point I have to chair a meeting, and very much like what you were saying earlier about how everything falls on the chair at the very least, because I know a meeting I'm chairing, I have to read everything, not skim read, not just lightly annotate. I prepare my questions, any comments, anything that I've spotted. I almost do it on a granular level so that when we're in those meetings, I know those papers. I know who the person is who wrote the paper. I know what their role is, what their title is, especially across the senior leadership team when you have so many different people, knowing what each of them, because they don't all do the same job. They may be all assistant heads or deputy heads, but they don't. The responsibilities are different. Someone could be data, someone could be curriculum, someone could be pastoral, someone could be professional development, someone could be IT, and each of them have different subject clusters that they manage because they share the workload with the head teacher. So for me, being able to know what they're going to summarize verbally in those meetings and know in advance what I may ask, but how I have decided to chair is after a paper has been presented, I thank the SLT first, SLT member who fed back. I will then open the floor to all my other governors first. That's just my routine. So that it doesn't feel like, because I'm chair, I have to speak first. I'm not saying it's wrong if any other chair does that. Like if they feedback, there's nothing wrong with that. You develop your style, exactly. So just because you may experience different chairs does not mean when you become chair, if you aspire to, you have to do it like the way you've seen anyone else do it. You can take a bit from that and take a bit from there and from that person and from him and from her and craft your own style.
Absolutely. Because I have in the past, but more formally in the setting last week, there were some items where I said, I've got some points, but I'd already made a note of them and everything because I did my prep. I've got some points, but does anybody else want to say anything? Or if it's clear, sometimes you can sort of get the vibe of whether there's going to be any discussion or not. And it was a very small meeting. There was only myself and 2 other trustees, and then members of staff. And so, you know, you get a kind of feel for you can sort of see if people are
eager to say something. Yeah, you see the hands popping up at times.
So I sort of fluctuated between the two. Sometimes I would be the last to speak or to ask questions. Other times I'd be the first.
Yeah.
And so I sort of, depending on the item, I sort of fluctuated it like that.
Yeah.
And so it just felt very natural, almost like it was then a natural conversation.
Yes.
Because sometimes if you speak first, it allows people time to think, because everybody digests information differently.
Yes.
And I'm a completer finisher or a reflector. So I need things,
time.
I need things written down and I need time.
Yeah.
I struggle with being presented with things in the meeting.
Spontaneity.
To be then
to bounce off it
in a position where I'm ready to give ideas and things like that. I need time to think and to digest. So where there are items that have much more content, that those are probably the ones that I would allow people to speak first, and those that I've read in advance and are less detailed may require, you know, just some comment or something, then I will tend to speak first.
So you're almost tailoring your chairing style or your leadership style to your learning style. That's very interesting.
Because it works for me.
That's actually I've never heard it like that. That's actually really interesting. Like because it's just really hitting me.
And it's just like what I'm doing with the trainee teachers that I'm working with. Once you understand self,
it's so important.
You have to understand self.
That's the starting point.
And that's why once you understand self, you don't then measure yourself against other people, because you recognise
that you are
that their differences are just different. It doesn't make them better or worse. They're just different to you. So I work well with activists and pragmatists, because they're constantly moving forward. And so they're going, forward, and I'm dotting the I's and crossing the T's and filling the gaps.
Finishing up, tidying up.
And so I recognise that I work well with them. If I was in a room full of reflectors, nobody would say anything.
That's so true.
Because
everyone's in their head.
Yeah, you're all digesting information and then, I don't know if I want to speak first, kind of thing.
And you see, just with all that you're saying, all of these different types of personalities and learning styles are sitting around that table. So it's for the chair to know their body, know who are the limbs on your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of obviously, with new governors, it may be a bit difficult because you're still trying to learn, but you may, as a chair, you may identify the person who doesn't speak.
Yes.
You may identify the person who has a link governor role, and it just makes sense for them to feed back in that particular committee meeting or LGB setting or GB. It may be a case of, someone who has, I don't want to say something to declare, but for example, in a secondary school, if it's a secondary school with a sixth form, you may have someone on your governing body who is an employee of one of the university destinations that sixth form students go to. So you may know that person, and so therefore that when you get to that item, they could have some knowledge to impart. So it's likely that it could be the 16th item on the agenda, and they haven't said anything for the first 13 items.
Yeah.
But they're going to say something by the end, because it's about aligning what their knowledge and skills is with the item on the agenda. So as a chair, it's really important. I would say the chair position it's not about you.
No, it's definitely
not about you.
It's not about you.
There's an element of you in it.
Yes.
But it's so much more than you.
Absolutely. And that's why the responsibility I think we've spoken previously about having your exit before your entry.
Yes.
So don't just come in and occupy the space. Mm-hmm. Change the space whilst you're there, mm-hmm. but make sure that you pull up. Mm-hmm. So you're pulling somebody through and you're buddying them, you're guiding them. And that could be several people. It doesn't just have to be one.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't just have to be somebody who carries the title of vice chair.
Yeah.
You know,
but anyone that you can see has that potential to step up in that area.
Absolutely, because it's so much better to have more than one person who is capable mm-hmm. and willing mm-hmm. to step into those roles. So then when it comes round to the annual election
or re-election,
you mm-hmm. then have a strong
pool to choose from
of people mm-hmm. to choose from, and
even if you're not choosing from them in terms of that role, you have that. It's almost like the skills, the knowledge, the people around that table, it's enriched.
Yes.
You know that even if they don't step up for chair, they are going to be proactive in something.
Yeah, and you know that the meetings are going to be,
proper discussions, proper meetings, not passive.
Yeah, it just gives a different feel. Yes. I love minuting meetings where, I know the school that you're governing in, and there were certain meetings that I just loved minuting.
I love it.
Because
I do love it.
And there was one particular committee that had, I think, 2 chairs from other committees.
Okay.
And it was just
the vibe's different.
Because a chair just they do just operate differently. And if you've got a meeting of chairs who are all used to fully engaging because they engage in their committee. Yeah. So it's almost natural that they engage
with each other
in other committees.
Yes.
It just gives.
It just helps.
It just gives a different vibe, and the minutes reflect that then.
And I think that SLT also appreciate it. I think the head and their leadership team, the senior leaders, really appreciate when governors engage in those meetings, especially if they've worked so hard on a paper. And there could be things that governors come up with, and the SLT almost breathe a sigh of relief for okay, because we exhausted it across the 5, 6 or 7 of us,
and then it's just come.
We never even thought about that. Or even just to know that support is there, because that's what governors are there to do. We're there to support the school's operations through the strategic arm. And so, you may not find a solution in that meeting for a problem, but the mere fact that you've been able to talk about it and discuss it, and it's been minuted, then it means you can track it and you can follow through and see what progress is being made. So it could be a case of a new policy comes in because the government has said that this new policy needs to be written, and it's asking the person who's responsible for that policy and procedure, saying, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts on it? Yeah. What impact is this going to have on this current academic year and future ones, or
on your workload,
etc. So then if you have a well-being, welfare, student staff well-being committee or something, but that item comes up on teaching and learning, for example, then it could be a case of, okay, that's something that you may need to speak about at another committee as well, so that you're looking at whatever teachers are involved, you're looking at the whole person,
absolutely,
what they do in terms of their teaching, their skill set, but also their mental well-being and how they're coping with a work-life balance or workload in school, if there's new things that are now expected of them. Yeah. So it's that. What I did want to ask, though, something that I've been itching to ask your opinion about, is what do you do, or what do you think you'll do if you've never been in this experience before, so you can't speak on experience, but what do you think you would do if there is a chair who has been chair for just automatic 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, a chair that is almost assumed, and then there's someone who does actually either nominate themselves or nominate someone else who they think should take up that role or would be good at it. What is your opinion around actually having another option to choose from, and it's the new person that's chosen and not the person who is the currently, air quotes, sitting chair.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
awkward.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good if the outgoing chair embraces it, because sometimes they'll say, I'm happy to be nominated unless there's somebody else.
Yeah.
When
but the reality of that.
Yeah, because they don't want to be ousted, because I suppose it can come across like, oh
you don't want me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Kind of thing. I think if chairs step down from being chair but remain on the governing body, I think that's a difficult thing.
Because almost they won't be privy to some of the conversations that they used to be a part of.
I just think that sometimes, because I've seen that, and
I don't want to say loss of power.
No, they've chosen to step down because of capacity or whatever.
But the reality
but wanted to remain on the governing body, which they have the right to do. But I think that can cause
some contention.
Not contention, but difficulty for the chair.
The new one.
The new chair.
Right.
Because people
can naturally
they do compare anyway, whether they go or they stay. But naturally, if that person's been a strong leader,
yes,
then it's almost like, oh, how is so and so voting?
Right.
And I'll vote that way.
Okay.
Or I don't want to go against so and so, kind of thing. So that can cause problems. If they have been ousted.
So they didn't choose to step down.
Yeah, if they didn't choose to step down,
the board chose someone else.
I think that they should take it on the chin.
Leave completely.
No.
Okay.
I don't, in that circumstance, I don't think they should necessarily leave.
Right.
Some may, and I don't think a governing body should feel guilty about the decision that they've made.
Because they can take their skills to another school or another setting.
And I do know that some governors have purposely voted midterm
because they
chairs out for whatever reason. It could be that they're just not adhering to the code of conduct, or their ego has taken over and they're making decisions in isolation without consulting the governing body and all of that. There's all sorts of reasons, and again it goes back to having a succession plan in the private sector, and I think it's maybe in the housing sector, I think, where they have a what they call a SID, a senior independent director,
right? And
their role is to almost do the performance management of the chair.
Okay.
So the chair does the governors do an annual how you doing kind of thing, that evaluation, because it doesn't happen that much in the education sector.
Do you think it should? Not to really cut your flow of
I think it's difficult to do when we're all volunteers.
Oh yeah, true.
Because there is a capacity issue. There's a lot of pressure then on the chair to do.
That's
imagine if you've got a governing body of 15 people.
That's a lot.
And you need to meet.
That's work.
That's work.
That's work.
So I understand the need for it in principle, but in practice, I couldn't turn around and say, yes, we should be doing this. In the
education sector, it's not fair.
If I was in that position, that I would be able to commit to that.
That probably links to our episode around the skills audit and how we can use that more effectively. Because if in the absence of having those one-on-ones with the chair or between chair and governor, then it's through the skills audit. It puts the responsibility on the governor to say, is there anything that you feel you need to voice up that you have as a skill or a piece of knowledge, or if it's a case of something you need to upskill in, or even just have a better understanding of who your governor colleagues are, so that you can, even if you don't have the skill, it doesn't need, because you don't need to be what do they call that phrase, jack of all trades. You don't need to be able to do everything and know everything. But you just need the balance across all of you on that body. So then it doesn't fall on the chair to say, okay, you've got this and you've got that and you're good for this and how you doing. I think the interaction needs to be everyone.
What? The vice chair could do it.
You know what? This is why we need a part 2. Because I really want to talk about this vice chair role, because I don't think I've ever seen or know of a situation. I shouldn't say seen, because of the very few settings I've been in.
Okay, let's do the takeaways then.
And then we'll speak about vice chair.
We'll talk about vice
so
chair.
Just for anyone listening, this is like a part 1 situation, and then we're going to move into a part 2. So look out for that next episode. So before we wrap up, we're going to do our takeaways. Do you have any takeaways from the chair stuff?
From the chair stuff, for any chairs listening, if you've been serving in the same school for more than 2 terms, which is usually about 8 years, I would say take some time out to reflect and review where you're at, considering a whole cohort of year 7s, if you're in secondary school, will have gone and left the school unless they're in 6th form.
I think of them as like a school generation.
Yeah, a whole generation will have passed through the school. What do you really need to stay where you are, or could you go to another school? That's what I think.
Okay, so your takeaway is almost like to chairs directly, any current chairs who have served as a chair for any length.
Yeah, I don't want any calls from schools saying that I'm encouraging their chairs
to leave. It's like, you know what? I've done my time. I need to go do other things. My takeaway would be probably from the position of someone new coming into the space. Or even not new, but you feel new. You still feel new if you're in your first term. I would say you're still relatively new if you're in your first term. I'm still in my first term. I think 3 years currently. This month actually. Woo! You know, we just have a moment.
Yeah.
It was November 2018 that I became a governor in the school that I'm still a governor in now. And I would say for anyone new or prospective governors, when you're thinking about leadership at a governance level in education, which would be the chair of a governing body, I would say rather than feel like, oh, that's a big leap, I can't do that, rather than take the negative kind of pathway of thinking, I would say think of what you could do as your stepping stones up towards.
Yeah.
So it could start with taking a link governor role, like we've spoken about in a previous episode. Then if an opportunity to be the chair of a committee comes up, because that's what happened to me.
That's your succession plan.
Yeah, like I was just like, if anything, use your greenness. We're going to make it a word.
your ignorance.
Your ignorance, your naivety, I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to figure it out. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to ask questions, because that's what I did. And I was like, no one else wanted to go for it, and we need a chair. So I almost said, okay, Liv, this is your opportunity, because it opens you up to so much more.
It makes you more present.
That's it. There's that too. And so I would say, rather than think, just like you would advise any teacher, any member of staff in a school, you don't just jump to headship.
Yeah.
You don't just become a head of a school or the executive head teacher. You'll probably go for the head of a department, or become the second in a department, then the head of a department, or the head of a year, or and then you may go to assistant head teacher, then deputy head teacher, and then head. You never just jump. You're not a newly qualified teacher or early careers teachers, they're calling them now, come in, headship. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So approach your governor journey in the same way. It's not to say that everyone is expected to become chairs at some point.
There'll be differences.
But I'd say look at how you want to level up in those in the time at which you're there, or in the chapters that you're there. So that would probably be my takeaway, the way to look at it. And it's not to say to anyone that Olivia's looking to be the chair of any governing body, just because I'm the chair of a committee. How I'm looking at it is, I'm the chair of this current committee. I may become the chair of another committee at the same school, because it gives me a different perspective. So that could be how I serve my terms. Each term I become the chair of a different committee.
Yeah.
So, so that would probably be mine.
I mean, I'm not going to extend the session, but there's also what we haven't spoken about is chairs of committees being re-elected each time.
Well, then maybe that's something we can speak about in a follow-up episode.
That's got to be part 3 or 4.
Yeah, because, well, we did say chair. We never said specifically what chair of what setting.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about trustee chairs.
Exactly. So there's so much more. So much more.
So much more to governance. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governor's Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governor's Podcast. Let's connect.